if you do go back to basics and you go back to thinking about how to allow design of your project to be a partnership and to be an organic process that inevitably should, I think, involve participants for it to be an ethical process, then in effect you are redefining what research is, and in fact you're opening yourself up to that process of reflective critical thinking right from the beginning, which I think is really important, because the insights that come with that process inevitably will cause you to think about what it is that you're doing. Why are you doing the research that you think you're doing? And then allowing other voices to come into that process and to shape that research in a way that is meaningful to your participants, not just to me or my research team as academics sitting in offices at Sydney Law School and thinking about outputs in a particular way, but actually thinking about how can my research be shaped in a way that truly gives back to my participants in a meaningful way and to the communities that I'm working with.
Let me give you an example just to sort of put this in perspective. I think one of the things we have to do is the way we communicate to researchers has to acknowledge this possibility. For example, we had a student in Japan when the tsunami struck. Now, if the message that's come from the ethics committee is you are not allowed to ask any questions that we did not already pre-approve, we're quashing the capacity to do really interesting research there. We've got students right now in Paris doing research on things that have nothing to do with the situation. Do we tell them, no, you're not approved to ask any questions about terrorism? You know, in fact, I can imagine a conversation getting totally derailed because the researcher won't talk about the situation, you know, and won't acknowledge the reality around them. So to me, we have to send a message back to the researchers, especially at the junior level, that we're with you. You know, we want the project to grow, but that we have to communicate that back, because I worry sometimes that the message is you're not allowed to do it if it's not on your ethics application. And that's not consistent with the possibility of seizing opportunities when they present themselves. You know, if, for example, the student who was in Japan during the tsunami, I mean, this is an incredible research opportunity to sort of see this and to work with people and to build, you know, and then to go through the situation with them and to talk about this. And people say, well, what about trauma? You know, the trauma of the student asking questions compared to the trauma of actually having lived through the tsunami, I think we're clutching our pearls a bit if we're worried about the trauma of being asked questions about things like this. I mean, people are living through this trauma together. Talking about it is what we think they probably need to do, you know, in most cases. Although there are cultural contexts where you don't. So but I guess the point is, I think the message from the research review committees has to be an openness to taking opportunity, an openness to the fluidity. If we pretend the fluidity doesn't exist, then the message goes back to researchers: don't do anything creative in the field, just do what we told you could do. Yeah.
I love your ideas, but what do we do in this case? What is the practical answer? Is it a case of us maybe developing the forms in a different way? I mean, we can give this message back to our researchers and say, oh, sure, if that opportunity comes up, just go for it. In me saying that as the chair of the FBE subcommittee, if something does go wrong, what happens then when this is the message that is instilled in universities today?
You know, what's the phrase to somebody with a hammer, everything looks like a nail? To a committee with a form, everything looks like it needs a form. You know, like, and you know, God forbid something go wrong. You know, I mean, these are the two risk-averse, you know, mechanisms we have. This kind of, you know, we will manage risk by getting a form through which, you know, and of course, it's nonsense. I mean, like I said, the cases I've had where people have actually been injured in the field, you know, somebody caught cholera, you know, they didn't have permission to catch cholera. They did not have permission, and you know, like, and there's no amount of giving them permission or not was going to stop that from happening. So I think, you know, this kind of we are in the business of making sure nothing goes wrong is part of what creates this kind of choking, deadening fear, not just in the researchers, but in the committee. And I don't really think that's the case. I mean, there's no plausible, in many cases, there's no plausible way, even the best, personal injury litigant lawyer, even in the United States, could pin that on the university. If there's a situation that arises that's not foreseeable either through the proposal or through reasonable, due diligence of the committee, then there's no way it can be pinned on you. So the fear is part of this discourse. We have the fear that something will go wrong. I would say I can guarantee things will go wrong. The question is, do we train researchers so that they can respond to those without coming apart, without having the project end? As soon as we send students overseas with study abroad, I can guarantee something will go wrong. It's not the question. The question is, how do we have mechanisms to recover, help, support, from those? And I think that's what we have to. The fear and the form, like the two swords that hang over you in the ethics committee. It's not on the form, and I'm afraid. And we just need to deal with this. So.
I mean, I think part of it starts with the education, and it starts with a really meaningful dialogue with the ethics committees and with involving people from ethics committees being involved in educating not just students but researchers. And I think, because I've got to say, when I started at Sydney Uni, this is back in 2000, there was a fairly, at the time, and I'm sure this isn't the case now, but it was very dominated by medical scientists. Now, no disrespect to my colleagues in the medical science, but, the sort of forms, some of you remember them, you sort of had to, you couldn't take DNA samples, which it sounded like fun actually, but I mean, I had a really hard time getting an ethics application through. I did with two other colleagues, did a research project on pornography called Understanding Pornography in Australia, which looked in a sort of social science way at who consumes pornography, what do they say about it, what are the things, who do they vote for, that kind of thing. And I think we had 5 goes getting it through the committee, and the concern was that it was unethical to ask people to discuss pornography, but also the settings in which we wanted to do it, which was the setting that the participant agreed to. And when I finally spoke to the committee, the concern emerged that, they'd obviously want to have sex with me if I was discussing pornography, but really the lens was very much a sort of medical science subject object relationship.
It's only through ethics that in some cases some students, researchers will ever even talk about practical questions at all in their research design. I mean, to me, ethics has been carrying too much of the load for encouraging research design discussions, because we get proposals and they're entirely theoretical documents. And the question, what do you do when you get off the plane? It's just never broached in the research design. So I actually think the ethics committee in some cases needs to be relieved of some of the duty of teaching and instructing on research design, because if we're doing a better job of research design, training, then a lot of these questions will be asked before we even get to the stage of ethics applications. But for the past 10 years, I've seen lots of anthropologists who would never even considered. They have these very abstract understandings about what are they going to do, and you say, well, what's the question you're going to ask in the interview that will get at that subject? And they have not even thought about it. So to me, that's a disservice that's being done to the ethics committee, where the ethics committee is given too much responsibility to reinforce good research design.
The quality of some of the applications we get, obviously written by a student, you think, where's the training here? Where's the support? And that makes me nervous, particularly allowing fluidity of the research in the field, which I'd love to be able to do.
No,
Great.
I agree 100%. I mean, sometimes I see an application that comes through the system from my own department, and I'll just, I'll be banging my head on the table, how the fuck did this thing get out of our department? Who let this go? Who signed this? And did they even look at it? But I think to get to that stage, though, we've got to. I mean, I hate to say it, there's misunderstanding on both sides, because part of that climate that creates those applications is the climate of, oh my God, this is awful, and you just got to get through it. Just turn something in. Just turn something in, for God's sake. And I think that it's on both sides. And I say sometimes to my colleagues, you've got to stop sending those emails, because they're actually really conscientious people on the other end of them who are, going to have to help you get through this process. You can't torch them. And vice versa, sometimes I want to say to the committee, come on, you're discrediting this whole process when you put some of these ideas in. You're just making shit up. And so the research, and what's going to happen is it's going to go back to my students, And my students aren't going to talk about the 4 out of 5 applications that got through with really great comments and, minimal. They're going to talk about the one that got spiked for something really stupid. And that's the atmosphere. So I think both sides has to work in this engagement so that they don't hold on to the animosity. Because I've got staff that want to hold on to the animosity, and I think we've got committee members too sometimes that want to hold on to this. These people are idiots. They need us, or else they would just, they'd hurt themselves. So I think that's got to build that relationship. And anthropologists, frankly, have been really terrible at this and it's partially stitched into, the type of psychology that you get in our department. That institutions are screwed up. We're fighting the man. It's all about resistance. This is not the right attitude to go into the ethics process with.